Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a scourge on humanity and a stain on modern and Western society. Anti-Semitic acts are increasing with such speed and ferocity that it appears as if there is nothing that can be done to stop this explosion of hate. Thinking like that is not just dangerous and empowering to the perpetrators of these hate crimes. Thinking like that is downright wrong. We can and must stop the recent explosion of anti-Semitic acts overtaking our communities, our cities, and our country. We must stop it for the sake of humanity and for the sake of society. One recent Tuesday in New York City alone, there were five anti-Semitic attacks, 5 in just one city, 5 attacks in a single day in a city that is considered to be Jewishly friendly. The number of attacks across the country are escalating so quickly that getting a real count is becoming nearly impossible. Fighting anti-Semitism is not just about protecting Jews or Jewish feelings or Jewish property. Jew hatred is the litmus test for a society. Jews are the first to be separated and the first to be identified and persecuted. Jews are the first to be murdered. Then comes everyone else. And that's why the fight against anti-Semitism is so important, so vital, so crucial. The Jews are the world's greatest scapegoat, par excellence. The German pastor and theologian Martin Niemöller, he lived from 1892 to 1984, he said it best in the form of a poem. There are several versions of his poem, but this is the most famous one. First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Niemöller's poem is not just about cowardice. It's about the stages of persecution in society. Niemöller delineates the victims and ends with the biting and frightening condemnation of inaction. When anti-Semitism, the first of the hatreds, is not confronted, a society renders itself powerless to stop all the other hatreds, even hatred hurled at the non-Jew. Anti-Semitism is a modern scientific movement that separated itself from traditional Jew hatred. Traditional Jew hatred was based on a theological hatred of the Jew as the deicide. The foundation was predicated on the Jew as having murdered Jesus. Anti-Semitism came into the world as a new word, a new idea in the late 1800s. It was coined by Wilhelm Marr in 1879 in his pamphlet called The Path of Germanism over Judaism. It was this cold-blooded scientific hatred that led to the Holocaust. It was the belief, the conviction, that problems of the world were caused by the Jews, and the solution to the world's problem would come in the form of the destruction of the Jews. That explains the term, the final solution, developed by the Nazis to describe their plan to rid the world of Jews and make the world a better place. Today, all forms of hatred toward the Jew are considered anti-Semitism, and that includes being anti-Israel. Jews are not sensitive to anti-Semitism purely for selfish reasons, and societies and leaders must prevent it, not because of their need to protect Jewish citizens. Anti-Semitism in all of its forms must be confronted by teachers, parents, religious leaders, politicians, police, courts, and media, including social media. It cannot be justified in the context of humor, as PewDiePie, the most popular YouTuber, did, the most popular in the world. He tried to do it that way. People need to speak out, and punishments need to be severe. Anti-Semitism is a hate crime, and society must not be afraid to use the terms and say it out loud. Anti-Semitism will not go away on its own. It must be rooted out. Those who still believe in anti-Semitism must be forced underground. It must be seen as unacceptable conversation in public and private, and online also. The bomb threats and the graffiti that came in the latest form of anti-Semitism to sully our nation can be prevented. Now that the culprit was arrested, coverage of the capture and the trials of the haters, these anti-Semites, must be front-page news. The message must get out. Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in our country. Once we lay out the blueprint for fighting and destroying anti-Semitism, Europe will follow. On a different topic, Israel and Iran are at war. Not a military war, a Twitter war. Their battlefield is the blogosphere, and their weapons are words. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif have been engaged in battle. And given the nature of Twitter, we are not only invited to witness the war, we are able to actively engage in their battle. It all started on Purim, when Netanyahu met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. During the press conference following their sit-down, Israeli Prime Minister referenced the holiday season of Purim, which was to be celebrated at the end of that week. The Purim holiday is based on the biblical book which tells the story of Esther, the queen of Persia. In the story, we learn that Haman, the evil vizier to the king, who plots to murder all the Jews of Persia. By the book's end, the Jews emerge victorious, Haman is hanged, and the miracle is celebrated yearly in the form of the holiday. Netanyahu paraphrased the story and applied the lessons of yore to today. He said that even until today, in Iran, there is the continuation of the plot of Purim. The modern-day Persians, i.e. Iranians, still want to destroy the Jewish state. Putin wished Netanyahu a happy Purim and then admonished him not to get bogged down in the fights with enemies from the past. He reminded Netanyahu that the biblical story took place in the 5th century BCE and suggested staying out of the past and instead engage with a different world of today. Iranians were deeply insulted by Netanyahu's comments. Their foreign minister, who was eloquent in English and talented in Twitter, picked up the mantle and blasted Netanyahu. Once again, Benjamin Netanyahu not only distorts the realities of today, but also distorts the past, including Jewish scripture. It is regrettable that the bigotry gets to the point of making allegation against an entire nation which saved Jews 3 times in history. Zarif continued with a second tweet. The book of Esther tells how Xerxes I saved the Jews from a plot hatched by Haman, the Agagite, which is marked on this very day, again during the time of Cyrus the Great, an Iranian king saved the Jews, this time from captivity in Babylon. And during the Second World War, when Jews were being slaughtered in Europe, Iran took them in. In his final tweet, Zarif reiterated his previous tweets and then really brought this Twitter battle into the 21st century, circa 2017. Zarif accused Netanyahu of creating fake history. He tweeted, "To sell bigoted lies against a nation which has saved Jews 3 times, Netanyahu resorting to fake history and falsifying Torah. Force of habit." But that was not enough for present-day Iran. Ali Larijani, the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, and the man who was also Iran's former nuclear negotiator, decided to enter the fray. Larijani launched into a tirade about the Torah, the story of Purim, and about history. Choosing old media over new social media, Larijani, as reported in Fars, the semi-official Iranian news agency, began shouting that apparently Netanyahu is neither acquainted with history nor has read the Torah. He is quoted as saying that Israel Prime Minister has distorted the Iranians' pre-Islam historical era and attempted to misrepresent events. Of course, nothing more than presenting such lies is expected from a wicked Zionist. Larijani, true to form, did not call Netanyahu by name, neither did he call Israel the Jewish state by name. The Iranian Speaker of the Parliament referred to them as the wicked Zionists. He emphasized the importance of Netanyahu's historical mistake as typical of the Zionists who cheat. He said, "It's necessary to discuss 2 points about the leader of the Zionist regime. First, he has distorted the history of pre-Islamic Iran, and he has reversed the events." Larijani concluded, "Apparently, he knows neither history nor has he read the Torah. Of course, more cannot be expected from a nefarious Zionist who spread lies like this." Netanyahu, as you can imagine, went back on the attack. Putting aside the attacks on his knowledge of history, the state of Israel, and the Jewish holiday of Purim, he instead tweeted about the focusing of bigotry. one of the epithets that Iran hurled on Israel. Netanyahu tweeted, "The Iranian foreign minister talks about tolerance when his regime hangs homosexuals, imprisons journalists, and calls for the destruction of Israel. Who are they kidding?" This is history in the making, a history we never envisioned, not even in our wildest imaginations, a biblical debate between world leaders in the public forum called Twitter. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. Both are from the New York Post, but they were published and picked up by dozens of other websites and papers. First up is a column by Carol Markovich. It's entitled, "Hey Rabbis, Stop Dividing Us in the Name of Fighting Hate." It was published on March 23, 2017 online and was in the print edition the next day. Markovich was born in Russia and raised in the US. She's a columnist for the New York Post, but was also a columnist for Time and for The Observer before this. Markovich takes the rabbis to task for assuming that everyone thinks the same way about politics in their liberal congregations. She says that the rabbis are wrong. Here's how she begins. "Dear rabbis of liberal congregations in New York City, you know me and I know you. Maybe one of my children went to your nursery school. Maybe I sit in your pews on holidays. Maybe I went to a Hanukkah party, a book reading, a charity drive at your synagogue, and volunteered my email address. I'm on your list, and I read your weekly messages carefully. Many are funny, thoughtful, community-oriented, inspiring." She is correct, but the rabbi's pulpit is often a bully pulpit. The idea is often to shape and change people's ideas to mesh with the rabbis about politics. Markovich asserts that Trump is not responsible for the uptick in anti-Semitism. She writes, "After all, if there were no Donald Trump, there would still be anti-Semitism. And as a leader in the Jewish community, you need to say so, loudly and often. It only serves to downplay the scourge of anti-Semitism to pretend it's an invention of Donald Trump or his followers. Think about it. The 2 people arrested so far for making bomb threats against Jewish centers have turned out to be nothing like we may have imagined they'd be. They're not white supremacists from states you'd probably never visit. No, on Wednesday, an American-Israeli Jewish teenage citizen was arrested for making some of those threats. A few weeks ago, Juan Thompson, a Hispanic leftist writer, was charged with making some." Then she says, "Look at what the rabbis are doing. They're forcing us out if we disagree at a time when it's essential to unite." She continues, "At a time when we need to stand together, you have to know you're fostering an atmosphere that is working against that goal. When you infuse the Purim spiel with your opposition to Donald Trump, do you know that you alienated people? I don't mean people in faraway red states. I mean people in your own congregations. I didn't vote for Donald Trump myself, and, in fact, as some members of your shuls could tell you, I tried my best to stop him. Ironically, people in your liberal New York world weren't too worried about the Trump win. Hillary was a lock, they said, but I was worried." She admits that she did not vote for Trump, but that she is a conservative, and being a conservative is very uncomfortable in the Jewish community. She writes, "Still, I'm a conservative, and people know that. So fellow congregants who did support Trump felt safe confiding in me about that. Yes, though it may surprise you to learn, these are people in your own congregations, people who voted for the man you so openly oppose. Your efforts to pretend these people don't exist or don't matter or are on the wrong side don't do anything to bridge any divides. Indeed, it's fair to ask, is your purpose to make people feel unwelcome? Certainly your emails, filled with calls for vigils and pleas for peace, as if Trump were the great evil facing Jews, if not the whole world, and Jews have a duty to stand up to him, suggest that. But why can't you live up to the values you write to me about weekly, most notably tolerance for people with different points of view?" Markovich concludes saying that Jewish leaders need to separate their need to fight the president from their need to fight anti-Semitism. She concludes, "But this didn't begin with Donald Trump, and it won't end with him. Now is the time to admit this and to stand together in opposition to anti-Semitism. It's time for Jewish leaders to disentangle their justified concern for the safety of Jews from their desire for a different president. Weakening Jewish unity and politicizing threats to Jews won't do anyone much good. Markowitz is correct. We often think that everyone around us thinks the same way we do. And very often people believe that those who think differently are either ill-informed or Neanderthals. There's a better way. It's called tolerance. And leaders, especially Jewish leaders, need to show us that way by example. Second up is also a column from the New York Post. It's by Betsy McAfee and is entitled, "Time for Us to Stop Funding Horrific United Nations Peacekeepers." It was published on March 23, 2017. McAfee is a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. She raises some important concerns about U.S. tax dollars going to the UN. Here's how she begins. Liberals shrieked last week when President Trump proposed cutting American funding for the United Nations by 50%. Trump dismisses the United Nations as a waste of time and money. That's the least of it. U.S. taxpayers bankroll the organization to the tune of $10 billion a year. Our hard-earned money perpetuates an organization that validates the most savage human rights abusers on the globe, regularly votes against America, and targets America's ally Israel for extinction. She says that the peacekeepers do bad things, bad acts that are not explainable or forgivable. McAfee describes some of them. In Haiti, UN peacekeepers dumped fecal waste into the local water supply, igniting a cholera outbreak that has killed 9,000 so far. In other strife-torn regions like Congo, peacekeepers have looked on while rival forces plunder the populace. And the horrors continue. Listen to how McAfee describes these events. Even worse, UN forces have become notorious for raping women and children. Peacekeepers sent to the Central African Republic were accused of raping more than 100 girls in one community. 4 of the girls were allegedly tied up and forced to have sex with a dog. Amnesty International for years has been drawing attention to these sexual crimes and their pervasiveness. Sexual assaults by UN personnel have been documented in Bosnia, Burundi, Cambodia, Congo, Guinea, Haiti, Kosovo, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Mali, and Sudan. Are all peacekeeping missions futile? No. But the United States should impose more ethical oversight and clearer definitions of purpose before bankrolling them. This is how she concludes. She explains that money should be spent more responsibly. Our new president knows that self-styled global do-gooders exploit American generosity while sacrificing American interest. He's having none of it. Though we are the United Nations' largest backer, the organization has ignored the real threats to the United States' security. It has done nothing to halt Islamic terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, instead ginning up false claims against Israel. Better to spend U.S. dollars fortifying our own defense capabilities rather than on UN peacekeeping boondoggles around the globe. Betsy McAfee also mentions Trump's love of Israel and insistence that the United Nations not constantly beat her up. We'll see if there can be any reform in the United Nations. I doubt it. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to discuss 6 cartoons today. One is about anti-Semitism in the United States, and the other 5 are about terror in London. The first cartoon is by John Cole. The cartoon is entitled Night of the Living Dead, and it takes place in the Jewish cemetery in Philadelphia. A skeleton named Vandalism and Bomb Threats is pushing down tombstones. The tombstone reads, U.S. Anti-Semitic Hate. The next 5 cartoons are all about the London terror attack. This first one was drawn by Raima Suprani and can be found in kegelcartoons.com on March 23, 2017. It's called The London Attack. The first one is a takeoff on Alice's Tea Party. Around the table is the Mad Hatter, the Hare, Alice, and the Terrorist. Next up is by Martin Sutovic in Slovakia, and it was published on March 23, 2017. It is entitled London Against Terror. A British gentleman is using his foot to stomp out a devilish fire-breathing dragon. He clearly will not succeed. The next cartoon up is also called London Attack, and it's by Marian Kamensky from Austria, and was published also on March 23, 2017. A car flies through Big Ben. The idea here is that the car, or car terror, is the equivalent of the planes during 9/11 flying through the World Trade Centers. This last cartoon is by Pierre Baloui of France and can be found in politicalcartoons.com on March 23, 2017. An Arab with a bomb is tiptoeing behind the palace guard, a beefeater. The message is that terror is happening right there, obvious to everyone. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. 3 teens in Pennsylvania spray the swastika on the parking lot of the Exeter Community Library. The teens stuck an apology note and $50 in the book return slot. The apology was found by library workers. The note said the youths were, quote, 3 stupid teenagers apologizing for our heinous acts. The note explained that the teens didn't intend to offend or hurt anyone. The teenagers explained that they all have religious roots and did not intentionally mean this as any form of hate speech or dislikeness towards any culture. This act of anti-Semitism is not typical. There is sincere contrition on the part of the teenagers. They had no idea of the magnitude of their deed, and they have since corrected their mistake. Most acts of anti-Semitism are perpetrated by real hateful people. Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority are embarking on a new strategy, and they are on the offensive. The Palestinian Authority is now aggressively pursuing the White House and Jewish communities in the United States. When President Donald Trump spoke to Abbas for the first time since assuming office, Trump spoke about his desire to get a resolution between Israel and the Palestinians. Abbas spoke about 2 states. In addition, Abbas has opened a new aggressive PR front. He's approaching Jewish communities in the U.S. He is reaching out to Jewish communities about speaking at temples and synagogues. This will be very important. It may result in a shift in momentum in the U.S. Jewish communities vis-a-vis the Palestinians. The U.S. Department of Justice has asked for Alam al-Tamimi to be extradited from Jordan to the United States to stand trial for bombing the Sbarro restaurant in Jerusalem on August 9, 2001. 2 of the 15 people murdered in the attack were U.S. citizens. 122 people were wounded in this terror attack. Al-Tamimi was convicted after pleading guilty. She scouted the pizzeria and she drove the suicide bomber there on the day of the attack. Al-Tamimi was released from prison in an exchange for the release of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Since her release, she's been the host of a very popular TV show in Jordan that regularly interviews terrorists, and on their show she often speaks about terrorism and even admitted to other terrorist activities. This is the first time the United States has engaged in prosecuting a terrorist for attacking Americans abroad. Jordan has denied the request. It was denied in the lower court and denied in the higher court. The reason given was that although the U.S. and Jordan signed the Treaty of Extradition in 2004, it was never voted on by the parliament. Funny thing here is that most international agreements in Jordan are not ratified by the parliament. It's a monarchy. The king is in charge. U.S. News & World Report has published its yearly list of powerful nations of the world. Israel was named number 8 in the most powerful category. Number 1 was the United States, followed by Russia, China, UK, Germany, France, Japan, and then Israel. Israel was listed 19 in the movers and shakers category and 25 in entrepreneurship. Israel's leading is an impressive standard by any level of measurement. Israel is a country with about 8 million people, and it's competitive with powerful countries like China with 1.5 billion, or the United States with 325 million. Israel truly is extremely powerful. And so is Saudi Arabia, which was rated number 9. United Arab Emirates, rated number 10. South Korea and Canada, 11 and 12, respectively. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that many philosophers have attempted to answer the question of anti-Semitism? Jean-Paul Sartre took a swing at the question in 1944, just after Paris was liberated from the Nazis. His long essay or short book was called Anti-Semite and Jew, or in French, Réflexions sur la question juive, Reflections on the Jewish Question. Sartre is deeply perturbed by the idea that anyone, especially a French person, could harbor hatred toward the Jew. His thesis begins by recalling his national exams on French poetry. A classmate was angered at a Jew who got a very good grade. Sartre's classmate had failed. Admittedly, the classmate did not study, but still hated the Jew and said, how could this immigrant, non-native born fellow Frenchman, Jew, know French poetry better than me, a Frenchman? Sartre is looking at what we call the etiology of hate, or the origin of hate. He concludes that anti-Semites know deep inside that their hatred is false and that it is based on ridiculous ideas. He suggests that the people lays claim to the nation in which they reside through this hatred. They see the damage and evil power, in this case the Jews, cause society. Sartre explains that anti-Semitism is not an idea, but a passion and an explanation for failure. This was true for his classmate. It's a valiant attempt by Sartre, but it does not explain the student's failure. He failed because he did not study. Instead, in this case, the purpose of anti-Semitism is to provide a target to express the anger at his failure. There's a big difference. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.